Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Mind. We are on our fifth stop of the Elite Series already for the 2025 season. Lake Fork out of Texas. Full of giants, right? Everybody knows about Lake Fork and its legendary status in terms of big bass. I've been there, I think this is my fourth time there. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the lake. And that's my own reasons. I've just always not done well there. I've made one cut now out of four tournaments, and for whatever reason, this place has got my number. Not really sure why. I had good feelings going into this tournament. The last time I made a cut there was more post spawn, and that's when we were there this year. It was kind of late spawn. There was still some on beds, but there was a shad spawn going on. There was post spawn fish to be had. I don't really love fishing fork right around the spawn when they're heavy on beds. It's just not my strength. So I felt like I could maybe have a decent tournament. Last time I was there, I caught a lot of fish, just flipping and pitching isolated bigger trees. Forks full of timber, right? But there's specific ones that have a bigger profile. They're maybe a little more isolated, and that's what I targeted last time. And in practice, it's kind of what I actually started to develop that bite again. I had some good bites in practice doing it, some 4 to 6 pounders, the kind that you need to make a cut on fork. And I had a few bites doing it in the tournament, but it kind of burned me. And I found a shad spawn deal, started on that each morning, and we'll kind of get into it and show you how that progressed. I did get some bites doing it, and then I also got some bites fishing a Jighead Minnow on some suspended fish around timber too. So I kind of bounced around a lot, which I think was actually a bit of my demise in this tournament. But we'll jump into it here. Day one on Lake Fork, going out of a beautiful ramp here that they built just a couple of years ago. Awesome facility. And I started, back in on a shad spawn deal that I had found the day before in practice on a swim jig. It was pretty easy to get some bites. Happened to be a bunch of us kind of started back there too, but get a really nice bite right off the bat there. That was a 3 to 4 pound fish. For whatever reason, did not hook up on that fish. I don't know why. Sometimes I just don't get that bait real well, but just swimming a white swim jig around boat docks, around some of this hyacinth that's floating around in this area. Like I said, the day before I had some good quality bites doing this, some 3 to 4 pounders anyways that I thought I could maybe get my day started with. Get a bite here, just a small keeper, but at least gets us on the board going in the right direction. This fish was way back behind the grass. I almost ate my swim jig off of that. There's some slop back in there. I almost ate it off the surface like a frog.
Better one.
Nice quality fish there. That's more the kind that we're looking for. So just over 4 pounds there. Good quality bite. That's kind of where hoping to get a couple of in that area. So I was just about to leave and that happened. So of course I kind of mill around back in this area, keep trying it. There's a lot of cover in this area to fish. As you can see, there's hyacinth floating all over, and that stuff's moving day to day. Like sometimes it's sucked way in towards the bank. You can see some of it's floating out, but ultimately no more bites, and I bail on that deal. And work my way out more towards the main lake to a stretch where I had, I think, 4 to 5 bites in practice, a couple quality ones. That's a new topwater that I'm throwing there from Rapala that will be coming out this summer. Looks similar to some baits on the market, but there's a little bit of a twist to it that you guys will have to kind of wait and see what that looks like come eye cast. But beyond the top water, you can see I'm just throwing to these isolated bigger trees with a jig or a big worm, just a whole monster 10-inch worm. That's what I did a lot of last time I was here when I made the cut and got some real quality bites doing it. And like I said, had a couple 5 to 6 pound bites in practice doing it. And that's what I'm doing, bouncing around to these trees, into these zones where I had some bites in practice. You know, these areas are kind of mid-range, I'd say. You know, 6 to 12 foot of water, not far outside of spawning areas, places that these fish will set up on post-spawn. And it's a pattern that I found last time we were here about the same time of year, and I really thought it was going to pan out for me in the tournament. And I get a few bites doing it throughout the event, but for me, I don't know if I was just on the wrong stretches or got too locked into doing it. You know, here I'm fishing some underwater stumps off of a point, doing the same deal, just throwing a big worm. Had a 5 pound bite on those stumps in practice, never got a bite in the tournament. So just running new stretches here. Finally get a good bite. And as you can see, I'm not too happy about it. That worm curled over the point of the hook and that fish came off. It was, I don't know, 3 to 4 pounder, something like that. And then we do get some bites, but of course the small ones come in the boat. It's the name of the game. And I really wasn't generating enough quality bites throughout the day to kind of make up for some of those lost fish. That's a problem, especially on Lake Fork. Little fish on the worm. So now it's time to, I'm going to make a big move up to a different zone of the lake. You know, I got 2 fish and it's like, I don't know, 12:30. We run probably 15-20 minutes up into a zone where I had some bites on a bigger profile minnow that is another bait that'll be coming out at ICAST under the Crush City line. It's a 5 1/4 inch minnow, and finally get my 3rd keeper in the boat there. Small keeper. But I caught a giant in this area the day before, so I felt like I had to work through here. That was a little fry garter sitting at the very top of a tree. Picked him off with the bigger minnow. Kind of a laughable size on fork, but what do? We only got 3 fish at the moment.
1 pound 4 ounces. Caught a 7.8 right here yesterday. Oh my gosh, it's a little bit small.
Just said I caught a 7.8 there in practice the day before. There was a big underwater tree there, a bunch of limbs, and yeah, caught one off almost 8 pounds. So you got to run it again, and tournament day you get one that's 1.5 pounds, but it's just how it goes. So we keep rolling in this area down another stretch that I hadn't fished yet. I finally hook up with a quality one here on the minnow. This is number 5, so we need to get in the boat for sure. Had a really tough day so far. Finally get a good bite.
Oh, okay.
That's what
Good
you
way.
need.
Way to get number 5.
Yeah. Feels ready. Nice. 6 pounds 6 ounces.
Sweet. 6.6. Fill out our limit.
So that's the kind we need for sure. Now we got, you know, a 4.1 and a 6.6, and On fork, you're only a couple bites away from getting yourself back in it. So I felt like, okay, I'm gonna, keep running some of this stuff with the minnow and hopefully run into another good bite or two. We really need two more good bites to have a decent bag. So do that for a bit, no bites, run back up shallow with this white swim jig and get a couple small bites. And in hindsight, watching some of this, I really should have put that white swim jig down in the afternoon. But I find myself using it a lot in the afternoon. And so anyways, ran some more stuff with the worm there, no bites. And that was the end of our day one. We got 5 bites, keeper bites all day. Had 14, 15 pounds, something like that, sitting down into the mid 70s. Not how you want to start your tournament on fork. Bounced around a lot. Caught some swim jig fish, caught some jig fish, big worm fish, caught my best ones on a bigger profile minnow. But ultimately kind of bounced around in several different areas and just didn't make it happen. You need 20 pounds minimum on fork to even be, in the conversation of making a cut, and we were nowhere near that. So we need to go out the next day and have a big day, 25 pounds or plus. So my plan was to run some of the same stuff in the morning, see if maybe that chat spawn deal was going to fire off again like it had in practice, and then I had to go back to that minnow area, and then we'll run some new stuff and just kind of see how the day progresses. So we'll jump into it here. So we start back in that same area on a point there with a buzzbait. Just trying to switch it up a little bit from that swim jig, see if we can't generate a good bite or two. And ultimately we just kind of haul water. No bites in that area. But we saw a 4-pound bite in there the day before. I saw a couple 4-pound bites in there in practice, so I felt like I had to run through there with this swim jig in the morning for the first hour, just see if we can't generate a couple big bites to get our day started. I know there's big fish that live back in this area, really year round. It's a great spawning part of Lake Fork, and there's always quality fish to be had back in here. I miss a bite there on that swim jig, and always throw it back in there when you miss a bite on that deal. Oftentimes they'll bite again. That's what happened here. We got a 2-pounder, not the kind you need on fork, but hey, we got our day started here. 2.6 for the day. So we keep rolling through here, but as soon as that sun gets up a little bit higher, I wanted to bail and start running some new water here the rest of the day, besides a couple areas. So we got out of there, ran some new stuff with a buzzbait here in some of the shade lines, just seeing if we can't prolong some of that morning bite. Just trying to figure out another piece to the puzzle here and fish a bunch of new stuff and try and get away from some of our old habits. But ultimately never got a bite there. Get back in another little pocket that I actually caught some fish in prior years, but I had not practiced back there this year. And get a bite right off the hopper back there on the swim jig. I'm guessing that was maybe a little bit of a shad spawn deal up against that road in the morning, and we caught maybe the latter part of it. 215, so almost a 3-pounder. Not a terrible one, not a great one for fork anyways. Here we just keep going down that stretch in the same area, pick up a frog. Get a bite relatively quickly on it, so that's a good sign. Two six, so just a limit filler at this point, or not even a limit filler, but just a filler fish at this point. Buzz out of there, so we got 3 now at this point, and I go back up to that area where I caught the 7.8 in practice and caught the 6-6 the day before. I felt like I had to run through there. Even though I wasn't getting a ton of bites, I had to run through that area with that bigger minnow and just see if it couldn't generate a bite. I wasn't expecting much, but sure enough, we never got a bite. Catches 7-8 there in practice, 6-6 the day before. A couple other small ones, and go through there and never get a bite in the tournament. So back to running new water with that white swim jig. Like I said, I think, I probably should have put that swim jig down midday. Start picking up a worm or a jig, or go flip some docks or something, get offshore with that minnow more is what I feel like I should have done watching this footage. But we keep rolling through these kind of post-spawn banks with these trees outside of spawning areas. And we finally get a good bite here on a little point on just a typical transition area post-spawn fish. £3 11 ounces, so not a terrible one. We kind of move up into this pocket a little more, and I see some huge blobs on my forward facing. So I'm messing with these fish for a while with the minnow. They sure looked like bass, the way they're positioned and moving, but they could have been catfish, I suppose. But I mess with those for a bit, then I get back up on the bank with the white swim jig, catch a small one. As you guys can kind of see here, I'm just shallow, then I'm mid-range, and I'm deep. I'm never really settling into a zone here throughout this whole tournament. Now here we're back out throwing a worm or a jig on these bigger trees. I can't remember what I had here at the moment. Looks like it was the old monster worm. Catch a small one. Just a secondary point, kind of post-spawn deal. Kind of get outside of that, pick up the minnow. I see some suspended fish out beyond that point. Kind of an awkward little hook set there. He had me kind of back behind the boat, but it's a good bite. One that I need for sure. That was on that 5 1/4 minnow that we're coming out with Crush City here this summer. £4 9 ounces, so good quality one. There's still some time left into the day to get a couple giant bites, and they're swimming everywhere in Fork. So I feel like I need to commit to this minnow and just see if we can't generate a few bites. These fish are just kind of suspended up near the tops of these trees. A lot of them, I think, are just post-spawn females hanging out there, recouping from the spawn. So we commit to it to the latter part of the day. Try and generate a couple more big bites. That's really the only way I've been able to generate a 6 pound plus bite, whether it's in practice or the tournament from the day prior, and on these trees and offshore areas, and then we're back to the swim jig. So watching this over again is kind of like, man, why? Okay, you caught a couple big ones in practice on the minnow, you caught a big one the day before, you just caught a 4 pounder. Why do you even go back shallow and mess with that stuff? But that's the stuff you wrestle with in these tournaments. That's a wrap on Lake Fork. 2 days, it went super quick. We had 5 keeper bites each day. It's pretty bad, you guys, especially on Lake Fork where there's big ones swimming everywhere. So super disappointing tournament. As I watched this footage over and as I was editing it, it really became apparent how I never really settled into an area, never settled into a pattern. For me, my strength is shallow power fishing. And I kind of got sucked into that offshore deal. I had a couple good bites doing it. And that's kind of the direction I went, besides throwing that white swim jig here and there. And looking back on it, I really wish I would have just committed my tournament shallow. I think I could have made a cut, maybe even had a decent finish doing it. That is my strength. We had a lot of rain leading up to this tournament, so the lake was high. It was very high in practice. It had kind of settled out a bit during the tournament, but it was high. There was still some fish spawning, a lot of post-spawn fish, which generally means there's going to be fish shallow, especially if the lake has come up. So I kind of got sucked into doing that offshore deal. I share some information with some Elite Series guys throughout the tournaments, and there were some guys that were having success doing that. And so I kind of got sucked into trying it, and then you get a couple decent bites, and then it leads you into kind of doing more of it in the tournament. But ultimately, I didn't do one thing well this week. I did a lot of things in a very mediocre way, you might say. Fish shallow a bit, caught a 4-pounder. Fish, the minnow a little bit, caught a 6-pounder and a 4-pounder. Fish mid-range, catch one almost 4. But I didn't dial in the shallow deal or the mid-range deal or the minnow deal. I was kind of just scattered about. Is kind of how I felt this week. And so I learned from that. You got to learn from it. And committing to one thing at times may not always be the deal, but I feel like in this tournament, if I would have committed one way or the other, I could have had at least a little bit better finish. May not have crushed them, but feel like I would have done better than the mid 70s. So what do? You live and learn. Lake Fork has got my number. I hope we go back though. It'll be another opportunity for some redemption there. The place is full of giants. It's tricky. It's not an easy place to figure out. There's even some guys on tour this year that, guide there and fish there a lot, have guided there in the past that had really tough events. It's just one of those places that if you're not careful, it can sting you pretty good. And it definitely stung me this week. So anyways, that's a wrap for our first event in Texas, stop number 5 on the Elites. I believe I fell out of AOY contention for the Classic after Lake Fork. I moved down into the 50s, so we got the Sabine River next. I enjoy that place. I love fishing rivers. The Sabine is a tough one, but I like those ones where you kind of got to mentally be strong and work hard and try and produce 5 bites of any size each day. So that's next on the docket for us. Need to have a good event to get back up into the Classic for the year-end AOY standings, and we'll see how that goes. So appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you at the next one.